Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Rumor has it that the Supreme Court has already ruled on whether to overturn Roe v. Wade. Well, actually, it's not a rumor. Chief Justice Roberts has copped to the authenticity of the leaked draft opinion, and so in June, the Supreme Court will formally announce that abortion on demand is no longer the law of the land. Now, when this rumor broke late Monday night, the reaction from the Democrats was swift and vociferous. I don't recall seeing any of them taking a knee in the Capitol Hill rec room. I don't recall Bernie Sanders saying that keeping abortion legal is unfeasible. It's just not feasible. Just not feasible. Instead, Bernie Sanders, he was already letting his Twitter fingers run wild, telling people that Congress needed to codify the legality of abortion at the congressional level. Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi were slamming their gums. Man, these guys were like a freaking beehive after somebody kicks it. See, white feminists are one of the Democrats' favorite constituencies. Never mind that white women broke for Trump twice. I haven't seen Democrats get this worked up about something since Texas and Florida and some other red states passed their own laws at the state level to criminalize abortion. Governor Newsom said that California was going to do legislative retaliation for that law by passing a similar law in California to go after gun retailers on the same grounds. Letitia James in New York, who was auditioning heavy for a seat in the Senate, or at least a cabinet post, she said that New York would also be instituting some of their own retaliatory measures. When it's something that affects a white constituency, these Democrats, all of a sudden, they start acting and reacting to the GOP's performative extremism. Tit for tat. The GOP threatens white feminist issues or LGBT issues, and they respond. Now, I know there's a few trolls and lurkers and some people who just don't get it in these parts, but let's make this real simple. Abortion simply is not a hot-button issue for the black community. It's not something that black folks say, I've got to go to the polls to defend abortion. For us, it's about tangibles. The question is, what the hell are we going to get? Abortion is simply being used as a political football in the game of power politics. So let's not major in the minors on this one. Now, why is this Supreme Court ruling happening? First of all, it's happening because these same white leftists made a religion out of lionizing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or Ruth Bigot Ginsburg as I like to call her. After she died, you had some white media types clearly thinking themselves clever, who even came up with a ridiculous nickname for that wrinkled racist hag. Notorious RBG. CNN even made a half-baked documentary about the old witch with the same name. Clearly some half-wit was trying to make that some sort of thing. They were saying that she was a pop icon. Pop icon? Really? Not many Americans know who Ruth Bigot Ginsburg was, and those who didn't consider her to be a pop anything. Though it should be remembered, she managed to get some attention for her racist comments about the NFL protests, calling them dumb and disrespectful. She later tried to white-splain that by saying she'd been inappropriately dismissive, but the racist witch didn't say that she was sorry or that she was wrong. Keep in mind, this is CNN who was putting out this propaganda for her, the Caucasian Nazi network. It's not that they loved her, they didn't care about her, it's that they wanted the public to like her because these white media types are always playing some kind of an angle. These are the exact same experts who advised Kamala Harris to dance to a Cardi B song. These white media pundits had made a cult out of heaping praise on Ginsburg. For a while there, you had to wonder if anything would get them to come out of their self-induced denialism and face up to reality. As it turned out, they would. When it hurt enough. You see, while they were lauding RBG for nothing, they allowed themselves to forget that Ginsburg died during a Republican administration, Trump's administration to be exact. By the time Bigot Ginsburg kicked the bucket, Trump had already appointed 2 Supreme Court justices to the bench, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. And with the Kavanaugh appointment, the Republicans now had the majority on the Supreme Court. With Bigot Ginsburg croaking, the stage was now set for them to have a supermajority. This was exactly what the Federalist Society had been fighting for since the 1980s. But they couldn't have done it on their own. They needed someone who was so stupid, so self-centered, so unbelievably egotistical that she would put her own pride before that of whatever leftist principles she claimed to have. Good thing for the GOP that RBG was on the court. Ginsburg was a proud old shrew. Being on the Supreme Court was her entire reason for being. She knew she had cancer back in 2009 when Obama was president. And that racist fossil was no spring chicken then either. There were those who told Ginsburg that it was time to eye the exit, resign so the Democrats could have time to get a replacement through the Senate. But Ginsburg wouldn't have any of that. She was hell-bound and determined to stay on the court no matter what, not because she thought that she was irreplaceable, but precisely because she knew she was completely expendable. This was a bad case of someone having the best job they were ever going to have in their worthless lives, and she knew it, and she wasn't leaving for any reason. She'd leave on the day that she gets buried, which is exactly what happened. Long as she was on the Supreme Court, she was a somebody. She mattered. But she knew that the moment she left, she'd just be some wrinkled-up, ugly crone sitting at the house because nobody would want her around. Hell, she's so stupid and uncharismatic, nobody would even pay her to come speak at their old folks' home. So RBG stayed on the court, acting like a big shot with the white media gassing up her empty head, like she was some sort of pop icon. And then she showed everyone just how brilliant she was. She died on September 20th, 2020. Sure, it was the waning days of Trump's first and last term, but there was still a whole month and some change before the election, so a mere 11 days after RBG's death, the Republicans put their Federalist Society stooge Amy Coney Barrett up for nomination to the court. Typically, judicial nominations don't move anywhere near that fast, but the GOP knew that Trump's re-election was uncertain at best. They could definitely see that they would lose control of the House and the Senate after the election, and they also knew that this was the only chance they'd ever have to have a supermajority on the Supreme Court. So they rammed Barrett's nomination through in record time. The GOP finally had the Supreme Court as their own rubber stamp. Stuffed with Federalist Society operatives, the Supreme Court would simply ignore the law and rule according to their GOP far right-wing ideology. But this was all RBG's doing. And as we see, there's some in the white media who have finally admitted to this fact. They're accurately giving Ginsburg her fair share of the blame for all this. Why? Because it finally hurts enough. I wouldn't be surprised at all if her pals over at CNN finally go ahead and reject her pop icon status and give her a little bit of blame. But there's also other people who should be blamed as well. Obama's refusal to punish the police, combined with his open contempt for the black community, soured the black voter base so much that Trump, an idiot game show host with a rotten toupee, was able to attain the presidency. Now, the Democrats had a choice in 2016. Produce the tangibles that they owed to black voters, or watch as the Republicans take power and run roughshod over them. Democrats chose to be as stubborn as Ruth Bigot Ginsburg. I guess that's why they worshipped her so much. Her stubbornness and stupidity reflects their own. And what did their pride and stubbornness get the Democrats? It got them a political humiliation in 2016, followed up by political mortification as Trump packed the Supreme Court with one right-wing wacko after the next. This is the cost of ignoring the black vote. The Democrats cut off their own noses to spite their faces. By the way, I'm not talking about just the Democratic leaders here so much as I'm talking about the rank-and-file non-black Democratic voters and ideologues. They're the ones who are the most furious about these developments. They're the ones who are hurt the most by it. They're the ones who must be made to understand that without black voters, the Republicans will just keep on having it all their own way and keep taking away whatever policies these white Democrats want to keep in place. The Democrats' plan now is to make an unholy racket about how the loss of abortion on demand is tantamount to the 9/11 attack. They'll send in their flunkies, like the black bootlicks I told you about yesterday. Sherry Beasley was on Twitter, letting everybody know that abortion was pretty much the single most important issue for her, and she makes sure to ask for campaign donations while she's doing it. Now, we've been here before. After Trump became president, white Democrats were in hysterics about that too. The sky was falling, you'll recall. They endured 4 long years of the GOP slapping them in the face, And when the 2020 election came around, Democrats tried the old ploy of telling us to go vote for nothing. But when they saw how we crushed Kamala Harris's would-be presidential campaign right out of the gate, and then Bloomberg immediately after her, the bastards realized this election wouldn't be business as usual. They realized that unless they at least pretended to speak to our interests, pretended to talk the way that the new black media does, Trump would stay in office. So they did. They began, at least temporarily, to start making the right noises because they looked at the polls in those battleground states. They also looked at how the GOP had been slapping them around, and it hurt enough for them to start talking right. You'll recall that's when Biden and Kamala started making their clearly phony promises, like their do-nothing, lift-every-voice plan, which wasn't a plan at all, and Biden's promise to impanel a presidential-level police oversight commission. We told you that that was nothing but game they were running. But just enough black folks fell for the con that Biden was able to carry Michigan and Georgia, which was what they really wanted. And of course, as soon as he took office, he immediately went back on those feeble, weak promises. That presidential-level police oversight commission, Biden said that he was too busy for that and Congress ought to handle that one, which of course they never did. And as for lift every voice, they stopped talking about that one before the election even took place. And they haven't made a peep about it since. But we had clowns like Cedric Richmond who were arguing with Ice Cube on Twitter saying that black people shouldn't be demanding Biden make us any promises just to get our vote. Why, we had to make him president first, and then maybe we can discuss what black folks will get. Maybe. Black people elected Biden president with no demands whatsoever. As a result, he promised us nothing, and he kept his word. 2 years ago, it was the black vote who threw Trump out of office. Out of a combination of righteous indignation and fear. He had spent 4 years launching a nonstop barrage of verbal insults and attacks against black folks, so a lot of black people wanted to show him that we could run his orange wrinkled behind out of D.C., and we did. I have no problem with that. My problem is that we didn't demand anything of the man who we chose to replace Trump. Biden, or most likely Harris, will run again in 2024, and we have to make sure we never let anyone forget the lies that they told about lift every voice in that police oversight commission. We have to stop letting these politicians off the hook when they lie to us. When they lie to us, there have to be consequences at the polls. We can't let them talk their way out of it. Speaking of which, now the Democrats are trying to terrify us back to the polls, and they're not telling us what they're going to give to black people. Instead, it's all about LGBT rights, immigrants, and abortion. In other words, they want us to get all excited about Democrats doing things for LGBT people, for Hispanics and Asians, and white women. In other words, everyone except black people. Well, that's not going to happen. They're saying that democracy hangs by a thread. I call BS on that one. Black people have never enjoyed democracy for a single instance in this country. What they really mean is that the policies that they as white Democrats enjoy are in danger, and I say good. Because if the country is truly in the danger that they claim it's in, if the situation is truly as perilous as they say, if the U.S. is truly hanging by a thread, then it ought to be easy for them to agree to pony up the reparations and other tangibles that they owe us. Those things ought to be pittances, absolutely trivial compared to whether or not the United States of America continues to exist, right? This ought to be a no-brainer for them, especially with all the billions of dollars they've been given to Ukraine with no questions asked. And yet they seem to be determined not to do it. So obviously the situation can't be as bad as they say, otherwise they'd be declaring that they'll be doing the things we've been demanding. So will the rank-and-file white Democratic voters and supporters finally recognize the truth about how they have to do what the black vote demands? Will they finally accept this new political reality? Honestly, I think they will. When it hurts enough. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Angel Maynor, Dondi Waddell, Vashon Hurst, Bucci, and DSC Bland. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.